Diabetes Connections is brought to you by One Touch. Every touch is a step forward. By Dexcom. Take control of your diabetes and live life to the fullest with Dexcom. By No Foods, no grain, no gluten, no guilt. And by Audible. Listening is the new reading.
This is Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
This week, open up your bag. Zip, zip, zip. A children's book about diabetes. The story behind it takes us into a great conversation with the author, Mike Lawson.
Raising a person with diabetes is very difficult. Scrap that. Raising a young person is very difficult. And then you throw diabetes on top of it, and it's just extra difficult. And I think that it's parents don't get thanked for kind of doing the job of parenting very often. And I think maybe this is extra touching because this is that extra layer of thanks, right?
We talk about the book itself, about Mike's diagnosis story, mistakenly told he had type 2 as a young adult, and his journey within the diabetes community. He's been involved in a lot of great campaigns. Plus, a new resource is now available in audio form. Listen to a bit of Bright Spots and Landmines, an already very popular diabetes guide. And an update on A Bad Case, a comedy show about type 1. This podcast is not intended as medical advice. If you have those kinds of questions, please contact your healthcare provider. Welcome to another week of the show. I feel like this is kind of a book club episode of Diabetes Connections. We're talking about two terrific books available for our community, and we'll get to that in just a little bit. If you are new, welcome. Glad to have you along. We aim to educate and inspire about type 1 diabetes by sharing stories of connection. My son Benny was diagnosed right before he turned 2, way back in 2006, which means we are coming up on 12 years with diabetes this winter. My husband has type 2. I don't have any kind of diabetes, but I have a background in broadcasting, local radio, and television news, and that is how you get the podcast. Thank you so much for all of your good wishes and messages about the hurricane. We were in the path of Hurricane Florence. I live in North Carolina, but we live closer to Charlotte, well west of where the worst of it was. We're not anywhere near the coast, so we just got a lot of rain and wind, but we did have some power failures around here, and I really appreciate everybody who reached out. And there is some information in the Facebook group, and I'll put it on the Diabetes Connections page as well, about help in hurricanes and natural disasters for people with diabetes, because there is a terrific organization that helps out with this. We actually talked to them last year after the hurricane and flooding in Texas. And while Florence is out of here, hurricane season is far from over, and there are some collections in our area and in other places if you'd like to help. All of the information will be in the show notes for this week in the Facebook group for Diabetes Connections. It's a free Facebook group, very easy to find, Diabetes Connections, the group, and on the page as well. A while back, we talked to Erin Spineto here on the podcast, probably best known for what she calls her C peptide projects. And that's not C like the letter C peptide as it pertains to diabetes. It is sea like the ocean, the sea, because she is a sailor, well known for her solo sailing trip down the Florida Keys. She also has sailed through the intercoastal waterways and published a book called Islands and Insulin. Well, we talked to Erin not because of all of that, but because she's producing a web TV series called A Bad Case, which is billed as kind of a dark comedy on life with diabetes, and it's out. So I will be linking that up in the show notes. Congratulations to her and to the cast and everybody who worked on this. Sounds like it's going to be terrific. As I'm taping this, it hasn't been released. The timing of this is just a little bit weird here, but it will be out by the time this episode is released, and I'll link it all up. I cannot wait to see this. It's been really fun to follow along with, and I urge you to go back and listen to that episode because the title, A Bad Case, comes from a bad translation that Erin went into. It's a bit of bathroom humor. So you have to go back and listen to that. Or you can ping me on Facebook or social media. I'll tell you what it was. I don't really feel like saying all the words here though, if that gives you any indication. My interview with Mike Lawson in just a moment. But first, Diabetes Connections is brought to you by OneTouch. OneTouch has been a trusted brand in blood glucose management for more than 30 years. This past year, Pharmacy Times and U.S. News & World Report named OneTouch as a #1 pharmacist-recommended brand in blood glucose monitoring devices based on a survey of pharmacists nationwide. Find out more about OneTouch brand products at diabetes-connections.com and click on the OneTouch logo. My guest this week is the author of Open Up Your Bag, a diabetes picture book. And it's one of 2 books we're talking about this week. A little bit later on, I'm going to be mentioning the audiobook version of Bright Spots and Landmines. We talked about this when it first came out. Now it's in audiobook form. I'm mentioning it here because I want to make sure you know I have a way that you can get it for free. You can get the audiobook for free of Bright Spots and Landmines. You're going to hear more about what's in the book and how it sounds a little bit later on, but make sure that you listen all the way through so I can tell you how to get your free copy. There is no audio version yet of Open Up Your Bag because it's a children's book. It's a picture book. Parents are supposed to read it to their kids. So I guess the audiobook is what happens every time you open it up and read it. And don't you have such great memories if you're a parent of an older child like I am now of reading to your kids? So much fun. I mean, at the time, yeah, sometimes it got a little crazy because you're reading the same thing over and over and over again. But now I really miss it. I love reading to my kids. And when you find a diabetes book that you can read with your type 1 toddler, your little kiddo, it is amazing. And Mike and I talk about that connection that you make when, there's not a lot out there for these kids, right? So when you find something that makes sense to them, it's something to really hang your hat on. I would buy multiple copies of books like Taking Diabetes to School or Jackie's Got Game, which we talk about in the interview, and I would give them to school. I was so excited to have anything that Benny's preschool, kindergarten, and first grade classmates could relate to. And then when the Coco books came out, the Lily partnership with Disney, it was amazing. I mean, Benny was a little too old by then, but he loved Mickey Mouse so much. If we had had those Coco books when he was little, it would have just made him so happy. I can't even imagine. But Mike's book is for a crowd that has nothing, really. This is for little ones. It's a picture book that you could see this being a child's first book that they could read to themselves. Although, man, I'd have so much fun reading it to Benny when he was 2 years old. I'm getting ahead of myself. Okay. Open Up Your Bag is a diabetes picture book for children in the early stages of developing their routine of managing life with diabetes. I mean, you're following these animal characters. They're pulling things out of their bag, a glucometer, doing typical things that kids with diabetes have to do. They eat glucose tabs. They put numbers into a pump. There are all sorts of little treasures to find in this book. It's wonderful to look at and fun to read. And Mike Lawson has been around the diabetes community in a very active way for a while. We talk about that during the interview as well. You may have heard him on the show once or twice, although he's never done an interview with me. His audio has appeared here before. I will link all of that up in the show notes because he is just terrific. He makes videos. I'll stop talking and get to Mike. Here's my interview with Mike Lawson. Mike, thanks for joining me. I'm really excited to talk about this book and all the other projects you're involved with.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. I believe this is the first time I've ever been on the show, right?
It is, which is crazy since we've known each other for so long.
Yeah.
And you've worn many hats in that time. So we're going to talk about a lot of things you're doing and have done for the diabetes community. But thank you for coming on. I'm thrilled to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, so let's start with the book. This really caught my eye as a parent of who once was a very young child with type 1. Benny was, not yet 2 when he was diagnosed. I know why I would have needed something like this, and there really is nothing out there. But why did you write it? Tell us the story of how the book came to be.
Sure. Well, I've worked in the diabetes space for quite a while now as an advocate and kind of in marketing for a nonprofit. And I just enjoy kind of doodling and drawing pictures, and that's always been part of what I've done in this space. And I don't know, I just have had like an idea for a book floating around in my head, and it's a skill that I have, and it's something that I wanted to do, so I did it.
When you had the idea, did it come kind of fully formed? I know sometimes when I have a project, it just pops into your head and you have to just write it down. Or did it come over time? Did you try other things, or was this always the story?
This kind of always was it, for the first one anyway. Like, something super simple. It's just kind of the daily routine of living with diabetes. It shows a meter, it shows a pump, it shows some insulin. It just kind of is, the basics. The drawings are kind of crude and basic too, and almost are kind of paper doll-y a little bit and rigid and overlaid onto photographs. And I don't know, it just all kind of came together in that way. Simple, basic. Yeah.
It is very simple, but that's really the beauty of children's books, I think.
Yeah.
Open up your bag. It is very simple, as is by design. There's not a lot of words here. Did the writing come pretty quickly? I mean, it's. I don't want to spoil anything for anyone who hasn't read it yet, but it's so great in how it's actionable words, it's fun words to say. Zip, zip, zip is really fun to read.
Yeah. The actual text really didn't take long to write at all. I have some really great friends, all of them who worked with me at Diabetes Hands Foundation, that I immediately sent stuff to. They all have my back. I have their back. They know it. I sent them the copy. They kind of gave me their feedback and helped me rewrite some of it. There really was a rewrite that happened in there. I know it sounds funny for, these simple sentences, but you want to get it right. And they helped me do that. And then a couple of them looked at the pictures before I put stuff out there too. So yeah, that's kind of how the process went.
All right, well, we'll get back to the book in a couple of minutes, but you have mentioned your background, and we should probably delve into that and then kind of build back up. So you mentioned, some of your work in advocacy, but when were you diagnosed, Mike? How old were you when you were diagnosed with type 1?
I was 20 years old, and I was living in LA at the time. And I actually was misdiagnosed as type 2 because I walked in with elevated glucose, a pretty high A1C, and I was an adult. And so I got a meter, a prescription for metformin, and told to watch what I ate. And that was pretty much how it went. It took almost a year to get a proper diagnosis, burning out my honeymoon period, most certainly, but also just really being confused and everything I thought I was doing everything right, but then, the numbers weren't adding up. And so it was a really weird year, and finally diagnosed correctly by a great nurse practitioner that just listened to me and trusted me and sent me in for a C-peptide test, and I figured out that I needed insulin and immediately started feeling better after that first insulin shot. Just kind of came together. And yeah, I'm on insulin. Right now I do MDI. I used to pump, but because of some insurance stuff right now, that's where I'm at. I kind of transitioned into working into this space after diagnosis, not long after diagnosis.
Yeah, when you got the correct diagnosis, I'm always curious because I hear so many stories of adults or young adults diagnosed incorrectly. How do you get to the point where you get the correct diagnosis? I know everybody's story is different, but were you just feeling so bad you finally went in and said, look, this isn't working? Or can you tell us a little bit more about how you advocated for yourself?
Yeah, it's really tough because it's almost like I've used this metaphor before, but imagine one of those old movies where they're talking to a criminal and trying to get them to kind of confess to a crime. And the criminal maybe didn't commit the crime, but they're there's so much pressure that they admit to something they didn't do. And I sort of felt that way in the doctor's office where I would get challenged, this food log isn't matching up with this A1C. They were almost suspecting that I wasn't being honest. And I kind of tricked myself into thinking that maybe I wasn't telling the whole story, or, your mind is, it's tricky.
They're the doctors.
They're the smart one in the room, right? And so you're supposed to just kind of go with it. And so it took a while for me to finally find somebody that I kind of felt comfortable to talk to, and kind of, I don't know, she just finally believed me, sent me in for a C-peptide test, and that was that. I like to kind of blame this on, awful doctors, but I also did a lot of doctor hopping in this time. So, I would start an appointment with, hi, I'm Mike and I have type 2 diabetes and this is what I'm dealing with. So they kind of all started at a disadvantage, not kind of knowing my full history. So I'll take a little bit of that blame.
Well, it's hard too. And I'm sure the appointments were 15 minutes long. Right. And you're moving around. It's very difficult. So you said you found the diabetes community, or at least parts of it, pretty close after. Who'd you find?
Well, I started making YouTube videos. I was alone, just kind of in my room making YouTube videos about diabetes and sort of learning through teaching. And that was kind of my entryway. I first found tudiabetes.org, and that online community, and Manny Hernandez and Melissa Lee and Landy Lee and all these kind of great volunteers in the community that really ushered me in and helped me in some really dark, tough times with my own sort of health insurance and coverage and struggling to pay for things. And I went through some really tough times where I found a community that really supported me through that. And just, after that, I owed so much to this community that it made perfect sense for me to try to figure out how to help this community as a career.
Wow, I didn't realize that. Tudiabetes.org was a great community with chat rooms, and my understanding is that it's kind of run now by Beyond Type 1, along with the Diabetes Hands Foundation, but it's not the same as it was, right? I mean, I don't want to assume anything.
Well, I mean, communities evolve and change, so it's maybe not the same as it used to be, but it's still there. It still has some pretty active conversation threads. And there's also, what's amazing about it is the archive of conversations.
Oh, so, that's great.
Yeah, if you just search, I don't know, search anything you're kind of thinking about, and you'll find a conversation thread, archived there, so you can see opinions about old pumps and all kinds of stuff.
Oh, great. Okay, I didn't realize that the archives were there. And I should mention that we've talked on the podcast to the people you mentioned, to Manny and to Melissa. So if you're interested in learning more about how those communities started and what they have been all about, I'll link that up in the show notes so you can go and kind of listen to their stories as well. So when you decided to try to make this more a part of your life, what was your management like? Do you feel like you were feeling better? You were feeling more healthy? I mean, I don't want to get too personal, but I'm assuming that after finding the community, you were no longer taking metformin.
Right. That is right.
Right back to Mike in just a moment. But first, Diabetes Connections is brought to you by Dexcom. One of the best features of the Dexcom G6 Mobile, the customizable alerts and alarms. Customizable threshold alerts provide advanced warning of hypo and hyperglycemic events before they happen, before lows and highs happen. Alerts help Benny when he's distracted during times like playing, hanging out, just being a normal teenager. And we have found it incredibly helpful to troubleshoot high blood sugars before they get too high, and definitely catching lows before they get too low. That predictive with the G6 is amazing. It predicts before they get too low. I can't imagine using a continuous glucose monitoring system without alarms. It really wouldn't work for us. Find out more about the Dexcom continuous glucose monitoring system at diabetes-connections.com and click on the Dexcom logo. And now back to Mike Lawson about how he got going in the community once he finally got the right diagnosis.
Yeah, and I started going into doctor's appointments knowing the right questions to ask, just kind of feeling more prepared to take charge in my own care. And I started asking the right questions. My A1C started going down, and I started becoming, healthier and happier for sure. And I credit the people that I found and the conversations and the bloggers and just this great online network of people that are all helping one another out because we share this common condition.
I'm trying to remember where I first kind of saw you, and it was either the Big Blue Test, which was part of Diabetes Hands Foundation, or one of your YouTube videos. I think one of the eating dinner or eating a meal with with people with diabetes was the one that I found. But let's start with Diabetes Hands Foundation and the Big Blue Test. You were the programming and marketing director for that group, right? What was tell me about that job.
Yeah, so I I started out as just a community member, somebody who enjoyed the programs of the Diabetes Hands Foundation, and I volunteered on a couple of graphic design projects that Manny had kind of thrown out to the community, and when they got a Helmsley grant in 2012, they had finally the budget to bring somebody on board to run some of their marketing efforts. So I put my hat in the ring and got that job and moved to the San Francisco Bay Area. I was living in Phoenix at the time. Moved to the Bay Area and worked there for quite a while. And one of the big projects that I ran was the Big Blue Test. I was the program manager for that. And for people who didn't know or who don't know, Big Blue Test was a program that kind of encourages physical activity as part of diabetes management and gets people to kind of get up and get active. And there was also a really cool charity component where when people got up and got active, a donation was made to a cool nonprofit that was doing great work for people with diabetes. So it's just like a really fun month of kind of activity and kind of community built around helping each other out, helping ourselves out by doing exercise, and then also talking about these nonprofits.
It was a good time. It was a neat way to find other people on Twitter at the time, too. I remember thinking it really connected a lot of us on social media at that time. And we made a goofy video with Benny and his friends at school, the jump rope club at his school. Mm-hmm. We have a jump rope club at our elementary school. The competing elementary school, I shouldn't say competing, the rival, if there's such a thing as elementary school, these are public schools, has a unicycle club.
Oh, wow.
So, isn't that crazy? It was great. So we had a lot of fun.
You guys should just start a big circus. It sounds like an act.
Please. Elementary school is all a circus, although now middle school isn't much better. And then the other thing, if listeners who have who heard our Thanksgiving show did hear you, because I did a Thanksgiving roundtable last year. I think I called it your survival guide, and I had people with type 1 talking about their experiences with family. And we played part of your video about eating to give your own family. Talk about those videos if you could, because you said that's really how you got started. And they were so simple. You just kind of would, I mean, you're very funny, Mike, obviously. You're very talented. But you would just kind of share these thoughts of helping people, but with humor.
In my bedroom all alone. It was it's the weirdest thing. I don't understand why I started it. I've always been the type, though, that, like, if I'm going to do something, I'm going to share it publicly. Like, it's just the way that I am. I started building websites when I was pretty young and, writing kind of like a newspaper gossip column online really young. I don't know why I just always like publishing stuff, and I've always enjoyed kind of putting stuff out there. So as I started kind of learning how to manage diabetes, and I'm really interested in kind of the social aspect of that. So like the diabetes police, or how to kind of get your friends to treat you right, and how to, care about diabetes properly. That all is very interesting to me. So as I'm kind of learning it and creating a story in my head, it just makes sense for me to put something out there.
That's great. And I know that some of the videos were for teenagers and not for their parents. So we'll link some of that up too. Do you still make videos like that anymore? Or are those?
No, there's people that do it so much better than me that when the internet was younger, it was kind of cool because the space wasn't super crowded, but I'll let the youngins do it now.
I kind of know what you mean, because I'm always urged to do more Facebook Live, especially people who advise bloggers and podcasters that you have to keep your brand going and do a Facebook Live. I'm like, my hair's a mess. I don't have a good space to do it in. The lighting's not great. I need more professional setup. And these kids, as you say, they just flick it on and they go and they talk, and they're great. It's all encouraging. So, did you ever think that your first book about diabetes would be a children's book, though? Was that the plan?
Let me tell you this. I never thought that my first book would be about diabetes. I knew it would be a children's book. That was decided upon. To be perfectly honest, though, I didn't, the diabetes thing was, in my head, it's kind of like this niche, a pretty kind of narrow segment or narrow niche, specific niche. And it's not a super crowded space, and I thought I could do something kind of cool here, which I know might kind of sounds sort of businessy and weird. If you're marketing a kid's book, you should use more heart than business, but I think that's kind of where I was at and why I decided to kind of go down this route first. Oh, well,
listen, my feeling has always been, you've got to be passionate about what you're doing, but there's no problem having a business plan and marketing it, because otherwise, you can be as passionate as you want. You want as many people to read this as you can. So that's got to be part of it. Absolutely. And you know this, you're part of the community, but we're a niche, but boy, this is a passionate community. And when we find something, we're on it. I can tell you, Benny is a little too old for this, although I guarantee you that he will enjoy it. He's so funny that way. But when he was about 4 or 5 years old, I want to say, we had a book called Jackie's Got Game. And I don't know if you've seen this. It's a book about a young boy, probably 7th grade or whatever. He's older than Benny was at the time. And he has type 1, and he has basketball tryouts. And he has a load during the tryout, and it's devastating. He's like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to make the team. And his parents are really encouraging, but they're like, you have to take care of your diabetes. You had to come out of the practice. That's just the way it is. And then, spoiler alert, he makes the team. But the coolest part was they showed the team roster. And one of the names on the roster was Benny. Out of this random book, it's not a very common name, Ben or Benjamin, but Benny. I'll tell you what, that was a life-changing moment in his diabetes management. And I'm not exaggerating, right? To see your name, to see the representation there. He read that book 5 million times. He probably doesn't even remember it now. But I know that it helped him when he went to school. He played a gym. He did whatever he needed to do, that he would remember that Jackie played on the team with Benny. Right. And so when you're talking about a book like this, I don't want to, we don't know each other that well, Mike. I don't want to fill your ego up too much. But that this is going to have an impact on kids with type 1 and their parents. And in fact, you've already seen this. Tell us the story about what happened on Twitter.
Oh my God, the video. You're putting me on the spot because I don't have her name handy, but
that's okay.
Somebody shared a video of a little toddler reading pages of the book already. And oh my God, it just filled me with so much joy, and it was so adorable. But she also shared it on Instagram and tagged me, and her Instagram sort of caption just was so great and just made me feel really great about putting this out there. She kind of explained how a lot of the books sort of try to get into diabetes terminology or teach a much deeper lesson, and I took it as a compliment. I hope it's not a dig, but she said, the simplicity of this was just that it's a couple of sentences. It's, a penguin holding her glucose meter like she should be. And it's just simple and kind of what a little toddler sort of kid's book should be.
Yeah, they don't have to be War and Peace. I mean, this is terrific. Yeah. What children's books did you like growing up and now? Like, what do you look at that kind of makes you happy?
I was way into. Do you remember the book If You Give a Mouse a Cookie?
Oh, sure.
I just love that book. I checked it out at the library all the time, and I used to trace the pictures in it, and I would also add pages to it. So I would kind of do my own sort of fan literature at a really young age. I also got really into Garfield comics for the longest time. Those were my go-to kind of visuals, for sure. Visual books.
Were you a purist? Would you disdain If You Give a Moose a Muffin or any of the sequels? Or
I think kind of based on my age, I think I was aged out by the sequel.
Okay.
I was kind of in the too cool for school, years, but when that book came out, the sequel.
That's really funny.
Yeah. We read a lot, though, as kids. We spent a lot of time at the library. And so I think, when it came to would I put a book together, like I said, it wasn't a question of would it be a kid's book or not. It was more just what would the kid's book be about.
Along with this, you've got a new website, Diabetes Doodles, where you've got printables and other things that kids can color. They're kind of pages from the book or the characters that are in the book. What do you hoping Diabetes Doodles does? Any plans for that?
Yeah, so I'm kind of seeing that as the hub of what I'm about to do. And I think that this first book, Open Up Your Bag, Diabetes Picture Book, is the first in kind of a series of picture books. And that Diabetes Doodles page will sort of be the hub for that, a place where you can find links to all the books. You can find news about, the newest thing, and you can find some free downloadable things to kind of supplement the experience with the books at home.
I should have asked at the beginning, but we can put this in here. So when you're not drawing children's books, what do you do? What's your job like these days, Mike?
I work for a theater production company in San Francisco, And that's kind of a new gig. I had worked in the diabetes space up until just about a year ago. So I'm kind of getting into understanding like ticketing and marketing of a theater production company. And it's a different world than diabetes.
Yeah, it's a great world, though, I would imagine, though. I mean, I love theater, and I'm sure the business of theater is different than the performance aspect of it.
Oh, yeah.
And you're also still working, though, in the diabetes community, right? You're with T1 International now?
Yeah, I'm on their trustee. I'm one of their trustees, which is they're a UK charity. So a trustee is a lot like the board of directors for a nonprofit here in the US. And so I'm a trustee there, and they're fighting a really good fight. And hopefully we're kind of put some more light on what's happening here in the US. It's close to my heart. Not long after diagnosis, I actually went DKA because of a month where I struggled to afford my insulin. And, it was just walking way too close to death because I couldn't afford a drug. And I think that that's kind of a shame that that's happening in our country. I think it's a shame that if you go to GoFundMe right now and search insulin, you're going to find over 6,000 people literally begging for their life. And I think we're at a crisis point in our country where something needs to happen, and I want to be part of what happens.
That's fantastic. We've had them on as well, and it is interesting that they are based in the UK, but I think they are, through the hashtag, you've seen that Insulin for All, as you listen here, that they're the folks who started that and continue to keep it going. So they do have a lot of information. I'll link that up as well, Mike, so people can get more information and become part of that. I agree. I think we're at a real tipping point in terms of the political atmosphere in this country. Whatever happens in the next midterm elections and in the presidential election, I think people are really keeping an eye on this now in a way that they hadn't been before, even though the price of insulin has been going up for 20 years. I mean, it's really...
Well, yeah. I mean, the list price of Humalog is close to $275 per vial, and that's a price increase of over 1,000% since 1996. So, that's drastic. I mean, inflation in that time is like 56%. So it's crazy.
It really is. But I appreciate you doing that. Keep us posted. I'm in touch with the folks at the organization. But if there's anything that we can help, get the word out. If there's any information that we can help with, I'm happy to do that. So are you going on a book tour? Are you doing signings? What's going on with the book? Where can we get it, right?
The people that have asked for signed copies, it's touching, but it's also just blown me away that, I don't know, it seems silly to me. Like, you could just get a fresh, clean copy.
I have to tell you, you worked in marketing? Come on. I did want to ask you about the inscription, the dedication, because usually these are dedicated to, thanks to my mom, thanks to my sister, my partner or whoever. But I actually got kind of emotional looking at the dedication because do you have
Stacey?
It really was. It's to the people that are taking care. I don't have it in front of me, Mike. Can you read it, or can you?
Yeah.
Can I ask you to share it?
It says this book is dedicated to all the families that are doing the sometimes thankless job of supporting a young person with diabetes. We appreciate you.
I'm choked up listening to you say it. It's
so nice.
I feel silly.
Don't feel silly at all. I think that, it takes a village, right? And raising a person with diabetes is very difficult. Scrap that. Raising a young person is very difficult. And then you throw diabetes on top of it, and it's just extra difficult. And I think that parents don't get thanked for kind of doing the job of parenting very often. And I think maybe this is extra touching because this is that extra layer of thanks, right? For that, not just thank you for parenting, which you don't get thanked enough for, but the extra work you've thrown into. I acknowledge that, and I appreciate it.
Well, I think it was also very unexpected because I assume that most parents, we don't expect thanks, we don't need thanks. To see you as and I'll still say you're as a young person living with type 1 to acknowledge that. It really goes a long way, especially, gosh, I'm a mushball, especially when I'm at the point now where my son is going into 8th grade and he is much more independent and he's doing, knock on wood, he's doing really well. But, there are parts of our diabetes management that we have moved on from, especially looking at a book like this. It's bittersweet, but that was really lovely to see. So on behalf of all of the parents, thank you for doing that, Mike. That was nice.
Yeah. And, I felt like with the sort of vocabulary in this book and the pictures and all that, it would probably be a book where parents would be picking it up to read it to children. And this would be, a rare opportunity to throw something their way right there in the front of it. So.
All right, I'm going to share a silly story. I may take this out. We'll see. All right, here's a question for you. When you read children's books to yourself, when you were at the library or when you read to kids today, if you do any public readings, do you ever do you do silly voices? Do they ask you for accents? I think that's so much fun.
I did voices all the time. Yeah. I worked for Boys and Girls Clubs for the longest time. And so I would always make an excuse to read a book to kids. I love it. Yeah.
It's one of my favorite things to do, too. My kids were always asking me for crazy accents and funny acting, act out the things. And we used to do the pigeon books. Are you familiar with those?
Oh, yes, of course.
So great. Don't let the pigeon drive the bus. I had to do those. I have terrible accents. I mean, I don't speak a second language, so I would have to do them in horrible French accents. And things. It's very funny.
I was going to say, I enjoy the Lorax so much. There's a lot of opportunities for voices there.
My daughter is the Dr. Seuss fan. She loved the Lorax, and she would read Fox and Socks before she could really read. She would memorize it.
Yes.
And to this day, that's a fun one. And everyone in my house likes tongue twisters because I was a public speaker and still am for so long, I'm pretty good at that. And so we would have these challenges. And, even when the kids were little, it was fun and it really helps them. There's nothing like reading aloud. It just helps everybody's brains work better.
So much fun.
I love it. Well, Mike, thank you so much for spending so much time with me on this. I really appreciate it. We will link up all of the ways to open up your bag and to find out more about you and the book. And please keep us posted.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're listening to Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
Much more information about Open Up Your Bag and about Mike at diabetes-connections.com or in the show notes. I'll also link up the video we did for the Big Blue Test. I mentioned that. That was really the first time that I got to know Mike. Wow, it's several years ago now already, probably 5 or 6 years ago. And that video was a lot of fun that we made at Betty's school with the Jump Rope Club. But Mike also has this website, Diabetes Doodles. And there are coloring pages, activity things that go along with the book. And I want to make sure that you can get that as well. And one of the fun things that Mike did is he drew a doodle of me. He did that for a couple of people as he was sending this out. Very smart press release kind of stuff. And I'm posting that on the Facebook page as well, so you can check it out. So thanks for doing that, Mike. That's pretty cool stuff. In our Know Better segment this week, Bright Spots and Landmines, now in audiobook. Know Better is brought to you by Know Better Foods. I talk about the waffles a lot when I talk about Know Better Foods. Let me just tell you a little bit more about why I like them. They are grain and gluten-free, high protein, high fiber, low carb, and low sodium. They are really good tasting, which is important, and they feel good. I don't know if you've had gluten-free foods before, and sometimes they're kind of mushy or weird, consistent. You can taste the coconut, that weirdness. No offense, coconut. But this is a smooth and bready feel, and that's important to me. We love the chocolate chip waffles, I will admit. But you know what? It's great. It doesn't spike Benny's blood sugar. You just bolus as usual. And sure, it does have coconut in it, and that's fine. I just don't like that gritty feel that you get sometimes. It's made with superfoods like coconut, almonds, egg whites, flaxseed, and chia seeds. So much to choose from here. Check it out, diabetes-connections.com. Click on the No Foods logo and find out more about all of their amazing foods that are grain and gluten and guilt-free. But all the bread products that you like, wraps and muffins and breadcrumbs, it's good stuff. And use the promo code Stacey10 at checkout and you will always save. We had DiaTribe's Adam Brown on the show last summer to talk about his book, Bright Spots and Landmines. And since then, the book has been everywhere, and they have distributed 75,000 copies of this book. And when I say that, of course, people have bought the book and they've bought the online version of the book. But DiaTribe also made a lot of it available through PDF, and they just want people to get this book. And it is all about finding ways to work with diabetes by focusing on the bright spots, the good stuff that works, and acknowledging and trying to minimize the landmines, the troubles that we can all fall into when we're trying to manage diabetes. And it's very, very, as a quick review here, very plainly worded, easy to follow, good stuff. Adam lives with type 1. And I think what makes this book different is that he gives practical advice. I mean, he gives you suggestions on everything from sleep, exercise, food, your mindset. And it talks about what works for him. And it's beyond, here's your basal rate and maybe try this to avoid a spike. Because we all know that there's so much more to diabetes management than just dosing insulin. Well, now Bright Spots and Landmines is available on audiobook. And what I wanted to hear is play you 2 longer clips read by Adam. And then I'm going to tell you how you can get this book on tape. Do we call it that anymore? And then I'm going to tell you how to get it for free, the audio version for free. Okay, so here is Adam. Here is part of the book talking about basically how to use the book, what's in it, and what you're going to learn.
Build incrementally and do not attempt huge leaps of change. Try adding or subtracting 1 or 2 things before moving on to more. This book should be seen as a toolbox of tactics I've found helpful, not a checklist of things to complete every day. You can always come back to your list or to the book if the change isn't working or if you've mastered it.
As I mentioned, Adam talks about everything from exercise to food to mindset to sleep. And here's a little bit about what he has to say about sleep.
I'm a night owl and find it easy to stay up late, but I also love the idea of being a morning person. It's a bad combination. When I do get 7 or more hours of sleep, usually one of the following helps. I stick to a firm get ready for bed time. At 10:30 p.m., I make moves to shower, brush teeth, and get into pajamas. I decide to wake up later the following morning, accepting the consequences of not being able to exercise or do as much before the day starts. I try to do this no more than a few times per week. I reel in the achiever in me and realize I don't have to finish whatever I'm working on tonight. I focus on what I will gain the next day by getting more sleep tonight. Clearer thinking, happier state of mind, more productivity, more blood sugars in my target range.
So you see what I mean? Practical stuff, talking about his own experience, but sharing that information in a way that we can use it. And there's so much more to the book than these 2 clips. So a lot more information in the show notes. There will be a direct link to the book, and there will be a direct link to the way you can get it for free. As you heard me say at the beginning of the show, Audible is a sponsor of Diabetes Connections. Audible is the books on tape arm of Amazon. At least that's how I describe it. You can get audiobooks on Audible. They have an amazing library, and listeners of Diabetes Connections can take advantage of a terrific offer right now. You can get 30 days for free on Audible and your first download for free. So join Audible, grab Bright Spots and Landmines, boom, it's all free. And I'll tell you what else, I checked with Adam because I didn't want him to lose money if we were getting the book for free. He said, it's awesome, go for it. We have his blessing. Because, I didn't want to take money away from him to push a promotion. That would be kind of weird. But it's all kosher, it's all good. And let me tell you something else about Adam. He has, and he talks about it in this book, and if you know about him online, he has this amazing breakfast that he is really, I think he created it, and he's really trying to get people to try it. It's a recipe he calls Chia Pudding. He also calls it the 3-minute diabetes breakfast that changes lives. All right, well, he puts a question mark after it, like, does it change lives? I'll link this video up in the show notes as well. But listen, I'm bringing this up because I think Chia Pudding is brilliant. I like chia, and there are so many different ways you can make this. But I think the term chia seed pudding sounds disgusting for breakfast. I like pudding. I like chia. Some reason you put them together, I think it's gross. And I've talked to Adam about this. We need to find him a better word. We need a term. We need a name for this breakfast that will catch on, because my 13-year-old is not eating chia seed pudding. So I'm trying to think, do we do like power oatmeal? It's not oatmeal though, right? Do we do, power chia mix? Something like that. Let me know what you think. Am I being ridiculous? There are so many different ways you can make this that we kind of have to have an umbrella. And I'm telling you, if you've never tried chia, I know you're thinking like, oh, health food, blah, what is it? They don't taste like anything. They're one of these wild foods that is just really good for you. And then you can flavor them with anything you like. And they're great. So don't be scared. But be scared of the name. Let's come up with something else for Adam. And oh yeah, go get the book as well. That'll probably help him out more than my silly pudding thing. And now you know better. As we finish out the month of September and look ahead, I want to let you know just a teeny little bit that I have something big in the works for November for Diabetes Month. And it is beyond the podcast, actually. We're going to talk about it here, but it's going to be something that can benefit you offline. I can't say more, but I can tell you that if you haven't already signed up for the newsletter, or if you're on Facebook, join the Facebook group. That is the best way to keep up here. But a lot of people are not on Facebook. That's fine. Please sign up for the newsletter, and you can get there just by going to the website, diabetes-connections.com, or in the show notes on any podcast app. Email me, Stacey@diabetes-connections.com. If you can't find it, you're going to want to be in the know. And frankly, I need you to be one of the first in the know. And all of this will become clear as we get closer to November. But boy, am I excited. And boy, it has been a lot of work to get here. So fingers crossed. And thank you already for your support. Thank you to my editor, to John Buchanan from Audio Editing Solutions. Very much appreciate him, and always appreciate you as you listen. If there's something you'd like to hear, please let me know. All those ways to contact me that I just said, or on social media. Let me know what you want to hear more about. The tech episodes blow up. I know that you love that. I think podcast listeners in general are just more involved in technology. I don't want to turn this into the tech show for diabetes, because there's so much more to our community than that. But I do have some cool high-tech stuff coming up. We're going to be checking in with Bigfoot, and we're going to be checking in with Eversense. That's the implantable CGM, with that company as well coming up. I talked to a guy who uses it. It is pretty wild. Would you want to put a CGM under your skin? We'll talk to a guy who did it later in October. Anyway, let me know what you'd like to hear. I am here to tell your stories. Thanks again for listening. I'm Stacey Sims. I'll see you back here next week.
Diabetes Connections is a production of Stacey Sims Media. All rights reserved, all wrongs avenged.